Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time to get to the business news now with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, full year profit for the country's largest bank. What? It's taken a bit of a tumble?
Yeah, ANZ Bank has shown that, like everyone else, it's not immune to the worst effects of COVID-19. Its income fell and its costs have risen in light of the emergence of the coronavirus. Its profit for the year is down by about $500 million as its earnings have been squeezed. That's really due to this low interest rate environment in which we find ourselves in at the moment. That took a significant bite out of its margins, and it's also had to put aside more and more money to cover bad debts. It's put aside $400 million to date, which is a significant sum of money, and the company's also had to spend more on its operations. So all of this left it with a net profit of $1.3 billion for the year.
Not to be sneezed at.
No, not at all. That's compared with $1.8 billion the year earlier, which represents a fall of about 27%. The bank says it's taken many steps to support customers throughout the pandemic. It says it's helped 43,000 customers so far with mortgage deferrals and loan adjustments, and that totals about $27 million. The bank's chief executive, Antonia Watson, she says all in all, she's pretty pleased with the result. She says the bank, it's in good shape to weather the COVID-19 storm going forward. And I'm sure this would come as quite welcome news to the RBNZ, who's been keeping a very close eye on the health of our banks in light of the pandemic, and they'll be encouraged to know that this bank is in, all things considered, a relatively good position.
Now, this is going to be interesting for a few people who might be going out to do their Christmas shopping and what have you. Trouble on the horizon for importers.
This is a troubling story. So the New Zealand Freight Forwarders Federation is warning of a critical shortage in shipping capacity. And it says the current demand for space for ships is up 25% on the prior period, and it's only likely to increase in the run-up to Christmas. And these delays in the global supply chain, it's really been due to COVID-19. When China went into its lockdown earlier this year, it effectively led to many shipping companies really scaling back the capacity that they offered. When the country opened up, demand really soared, and that wasn't just for that was demand for Chinese products, but also for global shipping space. But look, unfortunately, the demand is outstripping the available supply, and this is having huge flow-on effects because there is now severe congestion in ports all around the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, which will affect New Zealand. And what is really worrying is that the freight industry, this freight federation that represents the industry here in New Zealand, says that some shipping lines are cutting services to New Zealand to reduce the delays in their own schedules, and they're reporting that the shipping companies are not adding any additional services because there's a lack of boats and actually berthing windows. So the impact for importers could be quite significant because some are going to struggle with just getting their stuff into the country. There are going to be others who's going to face delays, and if you do even if you manage to get your stuff across the border, there's also going to be higher shipping costs attached to that. So when I spoke to the Federation's chief executive today, I asked them about when do you expect there to be, when do you expect this congestion to really ease up? She said she has no idea.
Are we talking mainly big items then? Are we talking like appliances, like your TVs and your washing machines and your stoves? Because other stuff some comes in planes, doesn't it?
Yeah, so air freight, it is really expensive at the moment, and because we have less international travel, which is how most of our goods is actually delivered to us, that's become really expensive. That's been scaled back, so a lot of importers have been looking towards shipping to get most of their items to New Zealand, but that also comes with significant delays. Planes get here in a jiffy, but with boats and things like that, there is a significant delay, but it looks like there's going to be even more delays on the horizon.
Now, tell me what's been going on the markets today too.
So the NZX Top 50, it had a strong rally this afternoon to limit its losses after it opened really sharply lower this morning. That's because it was engulfed by this negative mood from overseas. So it's closed down 0.5% to 62 points to 12,000. 201. And earlier in the show, you were talking to Air New Zealand. Yep. On the back of that announcement, its share price is down 3.4% to $1.41 per share. Our dollar, it's buying 66.4 US cents, 96 Australian, 51.1 British pence. And to mix things up a bit, I thought I'd give you the price.
Pig trotters, Sol, what have you got for me?
Bitcoin is up by a third of a percent. A single Bitcoin, a single unit of the cryptocurrency, that will buy you $19,000 around $19,945 New Zealand dollars.
Wowza. Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business news there. A population expert is warning the record growth that's stretching Auckland schools could get even worse. Massey University Professor Paul Spoonley says forecasts of 50,000 more school-aged children in the region by 2030 are conservative, and the government is not building new classrooms fast enough. He says this year's growth of 4,000 extra students, the region's highest in 16 years, should ease next year due to the impact of border controls before picking up again. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
If Education Ministry forecasts are accurate, Auckland schools will grow by an average of 4,000 to 5,000 children a year every year to 2030. That's even higher than this year's growth, but Paul Spoonley says the ministry's forecast will probably be exceeded.
That's probably reasonably conservative, even given what's happening with immigration, because we've still got the returning New Zealanders, we've still got large numbers of people who are going to be entering childbearing age in Auckland. We've still got relatively high fertility rates in parts of Auckland, particularly South Auckland. So all of those things will continue to drive the school-age population growth.
The government's planning 30 new schools and 21 school expansions to meet demand, but Paul Spoonley says it's not happening fast enough.
It's the story of Auckland, really, that the infrastructure is always behind the population growth and you're playing catch-up. Many of the new schools will have to be built out on the urban fringes of Auckland, but there's population growth there, and so the new schools will pay for that, but the problem is really in more established suburbs.
He says existing schools will find it hard to accommodate all the children coming to them because of housing densification. Heath McNeil is the principal of one of Auckland's fastest growing schools, Ormiston Primary. He says new schools and classrooms could and should be built faster.
The process for starting those, particularly the permanent builds, often is waiting too long because they're waiting for the final sign-off rather than getting started with some early design work so that when the money comes on stream, we're ready to go.
He says schools can wait 2 years for sign-off and nothing's done in the meantime to accelerate their build.
We're waiting years to get that investment sign-off and nothing's done in those 2 years to help increase the pace of the design or what's needed for each of those schools. So it's a period of just waiting.
The Education Ministry says it's trying to speed up the design phase by providing plans for new classrooms, increasing the output of pre-constructed modular classrooms and having designers and contractors ready to work on schools. It says Auckland is complex, but the ministry is better placed than ever to forecast and manage role growth. Meanwhile, Paul Spoonley says some relief is in sight. He expects the region's growth to ease next year and in 2022, giving schools and the ministry some time to catch up. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
It is 15 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that one. What's the situation at your school? Are classrooms getting crowded? How are they dealing with it? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed a New Zealand woman was among those removed from a plane in Doha and subjected to mandatory invasive internal examinations following the discovery of a newborn baby inside the terminal. MFAT has this afternoon slammed the incident in early October as completely unacceptable, and Qatar's Prime Minister has ordered a comprehensive investigation after the baby girl was found by security staff in a rubbish bin. Women from 10 flights, including one New Zealander, were removed from their planes as they prepared to take off from Hamad International Airport. Younger women were subjected to internal searches, and older women had their stomachs pressed to check if they had recently given birth. The incident only came to light last weekend after the Australian women involved had finished their 14-day quarantine. Australian woman Frances Ingram, an older passenger, was one of 18 Australians removed from her flight and told the ABC she initially thought her plane had been hijacked.
We were told that all females passengers had to leave with our passports. And then I got frightened because I thought, oh, this is a hijack. And the women are being allowed off and the men are going to be kept hostage. And I said to the air hostess, what's happening? And she said, no, you must just come with me. And there was this sense of urgency around her. So I didn't know what was happening. And she had to come with me because of my eyesight and took me to the lounge. And the other women were sitting separately who'd already been taken off. And they seemed to be taken off in 1 or 2s, and I was taken off by myself. I didn't know what was happening. The air hostess never told me at any stage. Then I was taken in a lift, and when I emerged down on the tarmac, I was surrounded by police. And again I said to her, I'm very frightened. My heart was going 19 to the dozen. And she still wouldn't tell me. She said, it's all right, it's all right. And by this stage, there didn't seem to be anybody to help, no advocacy, no agency at all. And then I saw the other women and went over to them, and one of them had said they'd been examined and that a baby had been found in the airport, and they were trying to find the mother. And I didn't realize the extent to which the women had been examined at that stage, and I was still waiting because I was still being held more or less by the air hostess. And my first thought was, oh my God, the poor mother of the baby, what is going to happen to her? And then it was my turn. I realized that there was a mobile ambulance there and there was a male doctor. And then when it was my turn to go, they said, no, they didn't want me. Well, of course, obviously, I mean, if that's what they were examining for childbirth, it obviously wasn't me. And then we were all escorted back onto the plane and sat in our seats. And it was only when I arrived back that I realized the depth to which some of the girls had been examined. I don't think all of them were examined that way, because one older woman said they had just felt her stomach and they didn't know how they could tell she was pregnant or had a baby by feeling her stomach. And then when we arrived back in Sydney, the doctor at the quarantine came to ask me if I needed counselling, and I said no, but in actual fact the experience did shake me up considerably, because I found myself in another hostage situation in quarantine. So I found quarantine very difficult after that.
And that was Australian woman Frances Ingram, who was on board one of the flights from Doha under investigation. She was speaking to the ABC. New coronavirus cases in Europe are soaring. France, Germany, the UK, Russia, Belgium and Italy are all experiencing record highs since the pandemic began. And new measures are coming into force. In France, a second lockdown is coming that includes a curfew for almost 50 million people. Germany too will shut down from next month. Our World Watch reporter Max Toll has more.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel sounded resigned as she broke the news to her country.
Wir können sagen, dass unser Gesundheitssystem heute
We can say that at the moment our health system can still cope with the challenge. But if the infections continue at the current speed, then we will reach the limits of our health system within weeks. That's very clear. That's why we must act, and we must do so now.
Schools and shops will stay open next month, but socialising will be limited to 2 households, and bars, restaurants and other leisure facilities will shut. Business owners in Berlin, as you'd expect, aren't happy. They've been protesting today.
It's important to be here to show that we are not responsible for this pandemic, but we are being used as scapegoats in all of this. If we have to close down, then we have to get help from the state, and we are not being helped at the moment.
There are more and more severe restrictions being taken against us, although we have developed very good hygiene concepts. We are dying, and that we need urgent help from politicians.
The COVID problem in France is far greater than in Germany. A new high of more than 50,000 daily cases this week. The country's worst day during the early weeks of the pandemic was 7,500. And so, a new national lockdown for at least the whole of November. People in France are being told to work from home where possible. Social gatherings are banned and all restaurants, bars and non-essential businesses will close. President Emmanuel Macron announced the drastic measures in a prime-time address to the nation.
The virus is spreading through France at a pace that even the most pessimistic provisions had not anticipated. The number of cases has doubled in less than 2 weeks. Yesterday, 527 of our fellow citizens died of COVID-19. Yesterday, we had 3,000 patients in intensive care, which is more than half our national capacity.
Italy too recorded its highest number of new cases today, almost 25,000. Earlier this week, the government told 3/4 of the country's school children that they must go back to online classes. All bars and restaurants must shut from early evening and cinemas and gyms must close completely. Some Italian hospitals are overrun with patients, and doctors, like this ICU worker in Lombardy, are at breaking point.
I think I felt like the soldiers during the world wars. I experienced what these young boys experienced at that time when they were fighting for a war, knowing that they could die.
Italy, like France and Germany, has already seen, at times, violent protests in the biggest cities. COVID fatigue is certainly setting in. For Checkpoint, Max Toll.
Wellington sports groups are pushing the City Council to scrap a proposal to ban new pokie machines in the capital. The City Council's sinking lid policy would mean if existing pokie venues close down, it won't allow a new one to open up. It would also mean venues won't be able to increase the number of pokie machines, but sporting groups fear the financial repercussions. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
It's a contentious proposal some sports groups worry might knock them for six. The council was inundated with submissions on the pokie policy and began hearing feedback from the community today. Many sporting groups rely on pokie money as a source of revenue and are vehemently opposed to the plan. Liz Green from Cricket Wellington told the council meeting the future of sport would be compromised.
We would be forced to introduce a user pay system and increase affiliation fees, which will undoubtedly make the game too expensive to play and administer for the majority of our participants, facility users and clubs.
Sue Gale from Netball Wellington echoed those fears, but also questioned what the wider impact on Wellington might be.
Sport is more than a vehicle of providing sport. It is actually a social thing. It's actually a physical thing, an emotional thing. It actually provides a lot. And if the sports are affected throughout the whole of the Wellington City because of this sinking lid policy, because we all of us rely on funding, we just wonder how the city is going to survive or be able to cope with the higher needs in other areas that aren't going to be able to be fulfilled.
Brian Dickinson from College Sport Wellington was asked if private funders could pick up the tab. However, he said that was tricky.
I could put an hour into a funding application and get the same level of funding that I could put months and months into a sponsorship agreement. The final outcome will be that I will now spend a lot of my time just purely revenue generating, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. All I'm doing is generating revenue to keep positions rather than actually concentrating on the real thing, and that's about getting the kids active and improving our participation rates.
Catriona McBean from disability support agency D-Sport says without the pokies money, disabled people would not be able to afford to participate.
If you want to play wheelchair rugby, you need a customised chair, personalised made for you. The quote I got recently is $13,650 for a piece of equipment. I get that through gaming funding, so our members don't have to pay for it personally.
However, a local resident, Bernard O'Shaughnessy, urged councillors to take a tougher stand against pokie machine companies. He says they've failed to be good members of society.
You should reduce the pokie machines by 50%. Also, I'd advocate an equal number of machines must be operated in each ward. It's disgusting, I think, that the poor wards have the most machines, yet the rich wards have none or few. Yet those same rich wards get a big slice of the pokie revenue for sports clubs.
The City Council will hear more submissions on the proposal next week and will consider it again in December. For Checkpoint, called Jonathan Mitchell.
Let us know what you think of that one. Should pokie machines be funding community sport, or is there a better model, or are you okay with it? Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. President Trump has been campaigning in the typically safe Republican state Arizona. A clear sign he's concerned it might flip to the Democrats. His visit comes as the United States continues to see record highs in new coronavirus cases. Yet the president seems to think the pandemic is all but over. CNN's Jim Acosta was watching his latest rally.
Down in the polls and fighting to hang on to Arizona, a traditional GOP stronghold he won 4 years ago, President Trump is sounding more desperate, escalating his attacks on wearing masks.
And in California, you have a special mask. You cannot, under any circumstances, take it off. You have to eat through the mask. It's a... Right? Right, Charlie? It's a very complex mechanism. And they don't realize those germs, they go through it like nothing.
He's found a new conspiracy theory to ride to Election Day that the media are somehow going to stop covering the coronavirus after November 3rd.
On November 4th, you won't be hearing as much about this. It's going to be, right now, it's COVID, COVID, COVID.
Part of an ugly closing message that Mr. Trump has adopted on the trail that includes raising doubts about the plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
I mean, we'll have to see if it's a problem, right? People are entitled to say maybe it was a problem, maybe it wasn't.
But the distractions aren't working, as there are daily reminders of the administration's bungled response to the coronavirus, including this press release from the White House Office of Science and Technology that cited ending the COVID-19 pandemic as one of Mr. Trump's achievements.
No, absolutely not. I think that was poorly worded. The intent was to say that it is our goal to end the virus.
The administration's top health experts are contradicting the president, like his false claim that new cases are soaring because of an increase in testing. Mr. Trump's testing czar said that's not true.
We do believe, and the data show, that the cases are going up. It's not just a function of testing. Yes, we're getting more cases identified, but the cases are actually going up. And we know that, too, because hospitalizations are going up.
And Dr. Anthony Fauci is knocking down the president's bogus claim that the U.S. is turning the corner in the pandemic.
I think it will be easily by the end of 2021 and perhaps even into the next year.
And that was Anthony Fauci ending that report by CNN's Jim Acosta. A quick bit of feedback before the news at 6 on supermarket pricing. This from a supermarket worker who says ultimately ensuring prices are accurate is a matter of labour. Prices are updated frequently, sometimes changing daily. So keeping prices up to date is down to staff who are often overworked, particularly roles away from checkouts. But seriously incorrect prices are like the tip of the iceberg. Supermarkets are making significant profits through owning the space between food producers and the majority of their customers, most of whom have few alternatives, particularly if they are busy or don't like to or can't drive.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. Air New Zealand is refusing to reveal how much money it has borrowed from the public purse. The airline revealed today that it plans to make another 880 international flight employees redundant. The government has offered it a credit line of $900 million, and at the last count it had drawn down $110 million of that. Chief Executive Greg Foran told Checkpoint any amount borrowed beyond that would not yet be disclosed.
That's not a number which we would put out at this stage because that's market-sensitive data. What we have said to the market is that we burn through cash between $65 to $85 million a month.
Greg Foran says a government freight contract is the only thing currently stopping Air New Zealand from being a domestic-only airline. A man has appeared in the Christchurch District Court in connection with 5 separate home invasions in Upper Riccarton this morning. The 45-year-old is charged with 3 counts of assault with intent to commit rape on a female over 16, 1 count of strangulation and 5 counts of burglary. Asked by Judge Quentin Hicks if he had anything to say, the man, who has been granted interim name suppression, said he was very sorry for what had happened. He made no plea and was remanded in custody for 3 weeks. Detective Senior Sergeant Colin Bailey says the 5 women subjected to the home invasions all showed extreme courage. A former senior police negotiator and 111 shift manager is dismayed an officer was working alone when she was shot at on a Northland road early on Tuesday morning. She escaped unharmed, but her two attackers are still at large. Lance Burdett spent 22 years in the police covering call-outs from Northland to Taupo until 6 years ago. He says the officer would have had a panic button and firearms in her car and a radio to speak to other staff, but he's surprised she was on her own.
When I was in charge of staff, there was always a two-person patrol at all times, and if there was somebody that was by themselves, then they were doing work in the office or doing correspondence. They certainly weren't out on the street by themselves.
Lance Burdett. The police say it isn't uncommon for officers to be in patrol cars alone, but the particular circumstances of the Northland attack will be the subject of a debriefing. A spokesperson says decisions about how many staff to deploy to a job are based on a number of factors, but safety is a priority. They say it's more common for officers to work alone in rural areas. The Maori Party has made Rawiri Waititi co-leader of the party, pending special votes confirming his win in the Waiariki electorate. The appointment was confirmed at a special general meeting last night. Mr Waititi replaces John Tamihere as co-leader with Debbie Ngarewa Peka.
Being the only waka to breach the red tide, that now responsibility has fallen on me, and I take it humbly and graciously to ensure that our waka is being steered into the right place.
On election night, Rawiri Waititi was leading Labour's Tamati Coffee by 415 votes in Waiariki. Germany is to go back into partial lockdown for all of November. The BBC's Jenny Hill reports from Berlin.
Germany had to act now, said Angela Merkel, to prevent a health emergency. As of Monday, bars, restaurants, arts and leisure facilities will close for a month. Although in contrast to earlier restrictions this year, schools, nurseries and shops will stay open. Professional sporting events, including the Bundesliga, will go ahead, but once again matches will be played to empty stadia. And private gatherings will be limited to a maximum of 10 people from 2 households. This country has fewer cases than many other parts of Europe, but the speed with which the virus is spreading has alarmed Berlin.
Jenny Hill reporting. It's 4 minutes past 6. The All Blacks coach Ian Foster has made just 3 changes to the starting side to face Australia in the third Bledisloe Cup test this weekend in Sydney, as they seek to wrap up the trophy for an 18th straight year. Hoskins Sotutu will start at number 8 in place of Adi Savia, who stayed in New Zealand for the birth of his second child, while Carl Tu'unukuafe comes in at prop for Joe Moody, who is still battling concussion symptoms after being knocked out in the second test in Auckland. Lock Sam Whitelock returns from his head knock to start. Foster says the All Blacks' sole focus is retaining the Bledisloe Cup, and he believes his selections give them continuity.
There's no hiding the fact that, the Bledisloe's a great series. It's always been special for us, and we haven't won it yet, and we want to win it. And so, we're erring on the side of probably consistency of selection and to try to grow our performance.
Ian Foster. The National Rugby League has backflipped on its decision to scrap the Australian national anthem at next Wednesday's State of Origin opener after an intervention from the Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Barely 2 hours after the decision was made public, Australian Rugby League Chairman Peter Vlanders says Hell has bowed to a backlash and reinstated it. The New Zealand Golf Open, scheduled to be played in Arrowtown in February, has been cancelled because of the ongoing effects of COVID-19. That's the news. Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
It does worry me. It really worries me when I walk around Melbourne today and people are out in the parks without masks as if nothing's gone on.
Lately with me, Susanna Leia-Tawa is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Benny, when she won the award, I was speaking to her and she said, I've been crying, how's my makeup?
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Susanna Leia-Tawa, this week from 10 on RNZ National. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Mostly cloudy, a few showers, some heavy in Northland and south of Waikato tomorrow afternoon. Taihape to Kapiti, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Often cloudy, scattered rain tonight, a few showers from tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, Wairarapa, Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered rain clearing to fine weather tomorrow morning or afternoon, with cloudy periods remaining in Wellington. For Nelson and Buller, periods of rain easing to isolated showers tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine spells, isolated showers this evening, possibly heavy inland, becoming cloudy with periods of rain tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls spreading south tonight. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A man's appeared in Christchurch District Court after allegedly breaking into several houses and attempting to rape a number of women this morning. Our reporter Conan Young has been in court and joins me now. Kia ora, Conan. What do we know about what happened?
Well, look, we're pretty limited in what we can say at this stage now that the case is in front of the courts. But from what the police have told us, all of these incidents, there were 5 of these incidents, 5 home invasions. And we know they happened within a really short space of time this morning. They all happened in in close proximity to one another in an area close to Canterbury University, where a lot of university students live. There were 3 home invasions on one street, and then another 2 on the further 2 streets that adjoin that street. And we know that the offender was apprehended in pretty quick order because by late morning the police were saying they had somebody helping them with their inquiries, as the police say. And then sometime after that they said that they had somebody appearing in court.
And so what are the allegations? What's the man being charged with?
So there's 5 charges of burglary. That's 1 each for each of those home invasions at the 5 houses. And then we have 3 of assault with intent to rape, and then 1 charge of strangulation. And we know that the 3 charges of intent to rape, they involve, and 1 charge of strangulation, they involve 3 of the 5 women in total that were involved in this.
So incredibly serious charges. What happened in court?
The 45-year-old who's been granted interim name suppression, he appeared in the dock. He was wearing a prison-issue smock and was in bare feet. The judge asked him at one stage if he had anything to say, to which he said he was very sorry for what happened. And at that point, the judge, Quentin Hicks, intervened and said, look, you better not say anything else until you've talked further to a lawyer. The judge remanded him in custody. There was no application for bail for 3 weeks, and he'll reappear in court once he's had a chance to talk to a lawyer again.
And so what have the police had to say?
The police have really praised what they've called the extreme courage of all of the women involved in coming forward so quickly, and they say this enabled them to respond as quickly as they did and get this person off the streets. So they've said that all 5 women were extremely courageous, and all 5 are receiving support now.
Thank you for that. That is Conan Young, our reporter in Christchurch, who was at the appearance of a man who's charged with 5 counts of burglary, 3 of assault with intent to commit rape on a female, and 1 of strangulation following what is being described as a series of home invasions this morning. The long-awaited COVID card has been launched in Nongataha in Rotorua, and now it's ready for testing. Up to 1,500 people over the age of 19 are being sought to try out the Bluetooth-enabled cards. The experiment aims to understand how the technology works in a real-world environment and whether it is compatible with current contact tracing methods. Our reporter Andrew McRae was at the launch.
It's a card that looks a bit like an office swipe card, and it can be worn around a person's neck or clipped to a belt. They detect Bluetooth signals with anyone nearby also wearing a card to build a record of contacts. The trial's a partnership between local iwi Te Arawa and the government. Digital Services Minister Chris Farfoy acknowledges it's taken some time to get to a trial stage for the cards.
Making sure that the technology has been up to scratch has taken some time, and we make no apologies for that. We've got to make sure it works.
He says there should be no privacy concerns about wearers' movements.
They certainly will talk to each other when they're close to each other like this, but they're not tracking movements. Also, the way that the data protection has been designed for the trial, Te Arawa will hold the personal information for people who register for the card. A completely different server will look after the data that comes out of the cards.
Te Arawa spokesperson Monty Morrison says Maori and Pacific people are more vulnerable to the virus than others, and the iwi sees the card as just another way to help protect them.
The number of people my age group, our kui and kaumātua, for instance, who don't have a cell phone, who don't have access to data, to be able to access this. So this way is obviously more user-friendly, and hopefully the trial will reveal that there will be a large take-up from it. Certainly the feedback that we've had so far indicate a very positive response.
He says the iwi has an opportunity to help make a real difference in the fight against COVID-19.
To assist in providing a process that's going to have benefits for the whole of the country. And really that's our part, not only benefit to us directly, but certainly implications, of course, for the rest of the country. And we're obviously proud to be part of that.
On the main street of Nongataha, views on the card were mixed.
I just keep a diary. Besides living on my own, I don't go anywhere.
So if you had the card around your neck, it would just be there all the time and would just do what it has to do?
Yeah, I think that's a better idea. With the older folk it is anyway.
Why we're wearing a card being introduced into the country? We're fine here, man. I think you're bringing it in.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't think it would work, or you don't want to use it?
I don't particularly want to at this stage anyway.
Do you, when you go into a shop, do you use your phone and...
No.
You don't do that?
No.
You don't think you should?
Well, not at this stage.
Chris Farfoy says he's confident the trial will get buy-in from the local community.
The trial is about, finding out after 3 or 4 days of being excited about it, are people going to continue to wear them or are they going to leave them? We hope we can get some really good data about how people are reacting to them. That's what the trial is about. And then after we've got the results of that, then we can make an informed decision about what we do with this kind of technology.
Mr Farfoy says any COVID tracing card is really just an additional safeguard to use along with the COVID tracing app. The trial will go live in Nongataha on November the 9th and run for a week. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
A lot of you are getting in touch about pokies funding community sport and whether that's a good thing or not. Adam says, listening to your story on pokies, I hear everyone's point, but gambling fundamentally is something that destroys people's lives and is not the funding source we should look to, robbing from one to give to another. Ben's got in touch to say, I play sports, soccer, squash and tennis in Wellington and have done for years. I can't believe clubs think pokies are an ethical way of funding them. It not only has terrible social impacts, it is also inequitable, with poor communities funding rich suburbs sport. I might stop playing if my club is funded by pokies. Bring on user pays. I'd pay, says Ben. Someone else says sports shouldn't be funded by the misery of others. Get rid of the pokie machines. And this one from a listener who says sporting groups demanding pokie funds so that they don't have to charge their participants seems to miss the point that they are being subsidised by gamblers who are often addicts. The funding model is broken and intrinsically unfair. If that's the case, what do we do? How do we fund it? And what about those people who genuinely cannot afford to be part of a team or participate without this funding? 2101 on the text. The Greens and Labour are inching closer to a governing deal, with an announcement expected on Sunday. Co-leaders Marama Davidson and James Shaw met with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern again this afternoon. Mr Shaw says they are on track to conclude talks tomorrow as planned.
We are really in the kind of final rats and mice stage, so we can't really say what the concluding round is going to look like. But you know, the talks are going very well. It is very constructive, and we are just getting into final details.
Final tweaks. Yeah. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister echoed this, saying, quote, discussions on a final text are nearing conclusion. Once the deal's hashed out, a Zoom call will be held with about 150 Green Party delegates, likely to take place on Saturday. They will vote on the deal with a 75% majority needed to give it the green light. Ms Davidson says details of the deal will not be made public before delegates vote.
For a good process, which our party really values, we do want it to go to the members to make that final decision.
How long do your members take to assess the deal? How does that process work?
Oh, it's last time it took some hours to be able to go through the deal for our members to consider it carefully. It's hard to tell exactly how long it will take, but we allow, I think the main point is, we allow for the delegates to have a good look at what is put before them. It's a big decision.
And in case you're wondering, the biscuits on the table today were Tim Tams, with Mr Shaw quipping, you could say that the talks are getting sweeter. It is almost 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The mass shooting at a school in Parkland, Florida in 2018 inspired a passionate campaign for greater gun control in America. Yet, more than 2 years on, the debate continues. With less than a week to go before the US presidential election, the BBC's Nomia Iqbal speaks to those still grieving from the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School.
Yo, it's me. It's Guac.
A voice from beyond the grave.
I've been gone for 2 years and nothing's changed, bro. People are still getting killed by guns.
Joaquin Oliver was one of the students killed by a gunman inside the school in Parkland.
The election in November is the first one I could have voted in.
This advert is a digital resurrection with a purpose.
Register, then go vote.
Joaquin's parents, Patricia and Manuel Oliver, are committed to a lifelong campaign on behalf of their murdered son.
We are representing him and we are trying our best to keep his voice live.
They want people to vote and to back politicians who believe in greater gun control and oppose those who are supported by powerful gun lobbies like the National Rifle Association.
Gun violence was an issue for him. We talked about the Vegas shooting after it happened. And he was very disappointed about a system that was not able to fix that. And then a few months later, it happened to him.
For decades, Joe Biden has opposed your gun rights.
The Second Amendment, protecting the right of people to keep and bear arms, is enshrined in the Constitution here and fiercely defended by the NRA.
In this election, self-defense is on the line.
President Trump claims his rival Joe Biden will take that right away.
He's against God, he's against guns.
The pandemic, a summer of civil unrest, and now the election has driven up gun sales to record levels.
He's going to do things that nobody would ever think even possible. Take away your guns, destroy your Second Amendment.
I will never, 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 never give up this fight.
And in a deeply polarised nation, guns are an issue often used to define which side you're on.
Won't stop until we beat the NRA. And it will not stop until we ban killer assault weapons.
My whole life changed since my daughter was murdered.
Andrew Pollack left Florida after the murder of his 18-year-old daughter, Meadow, at Parkland.
I think of my daughter every day. Describe it as a slow, dull pain that never goes away.
His daughter was a friend of Joaquin Oliver's, but both parents' views on gun control completely diverge.
My daughter and hundreds of kids called 911 that day when they were in the school, and no one came to save them. That's why I'm such an advocate of the Second Amendment. No one's ever going to take any of my guns from me. Sometimes you need to be there to fight evil, and you need to even the playing field.
The murder of 17 people at the school wasn't the first mass shooting, but it mobilised a generation in a way that hadn't been seen before.
They might preach NRA.
And that campaign went all the way to Washington.
But we're preaching REV. Register, educate, vote.
Thousands turned up in Washington that day to hear students like Parkland survivor Ryan Deach speak about the need for more gun control. 2 years on, is he disappointed with the lack of progress?
This is going to take a long, long time. I don't expect this to come tomorrow, and I don't expect it to come the next day. I don't even expect it to come regardless of who wins this presidency. It is not something to be expected. It is something to be fought for.
And one that's also being fought by his schoolmate Joaquin in death.
Vote for me, because I can't. We've got to keep on fighting, and we got to end this.
That report by the BBC's Nomia Iqbal. In the midst of its worst economic crisis in decades, Cuba is watching the US election more closely than perhaps any other country in Latin America. And President Trump and Joe Biden have very different records in their treatment of the communist-run island. The ramifications could mean the difference between economic ruin or a return to the better relations enjoyed under President Obama. The BBC's Will Grant reports from Havana.
For consecutive nights, a different minister has appeared on Cuban state television on a roundtable discussion show called Mesa Redonda. From the economy to tourism to transport, they have attempted to explain to the viewing public the communist-run government's route out of the island's current crisis.
Siempre que explicamos lo relativo a los servicios de transporte, pues los agrupamos.
More often than not, however, the people watching at home are left with more questions than answers. But Cuba's problems aren't solely down to coronavirus.
Today we reaffirm our ironclad solidarity with the Cuban people and our eternal conviction that freedom will prevail over the sinister forces of communism and evil of many different forms.
Over the past 4 years, President Trump has consistently tightened the decades-old US economic embargo on the island. His administration insists their hard line is intended to hurt the Cuban government, but it is undoubtedly also aimed at a domestic audience in the US, in pursuit of the all-important Cuban-American vote in Florida. Most recently, President Trump clamped down on US citizens travelling to Cuba and on the island's luxury exports, rum and tobacco.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the raising of the flag and the national anthem of the United States.
It all amounts to a complete reversal of his predecessor's policy of normalising diplomatic ties with Cuba, reopening the US embassy in Havana and relaxing economic sanctions. Yet today, for most Cubans, President Obama's short-lived thaw now seems a long time ago. Carlos Azugaray is a former Cuban diplomat and a professor in international relations.
Trump has taken regime change with prejudice. Is regime change causing as much damage as possible? Whereas Biden had a lot to do with the opening to Cuba. He defended the idea and he pushed for a broad agreement of normalization.
Cuba's command economy is in its worst shape for many years, with shortages and queues both common features of daily life on the island. Yet the US economic embargo and President Trump's decision to repeatedly ramp it up has created further hardship in Cuba. At a queue outside one of Havana's biggest supermarkets, several of those who waited patiently in the sun said they couldn't take another 4 years of President Trump.
I think Trump shouldn't be re-elected. We can't bear any more of him. There's no more tourists. He wants to stop Americans from coming. Everything is a problem with this man.
The rallies taking place in Florida aren't geographically very far from the food queues in Havana, but are a world away in so many respects. President Trump is banking on what worked for him in Florida in 2016, emphasising his tough line on Cuba and Venezuela while painting his rival, Joe Biden, as a radical socialist. But even there, the demographics are changing. Many younger Latinos are turned off by the anti-communist scare tactics and the aggressive approach to their grandparents' and parents' impoverished homelands, especially amid a global pandemic. Not for the first time, then, Cuba could play an outsized role in US politics on the 3rd of November.
Will Grant in Cuba. Kiwi boxers Joseph Parker and Junior Fa are ramping up preparations as their heavyweight matchup looms closer. With a date clash with the All Blacks now ruled out, today it was announced the fight has been pushed back a day to Saturday, December 12th. While 24 hours isn't much, every day is particularly important for Parker, with longtime trainer Kevin Barry just 1 week out of quarantine, having arrived from America. Clay Wilson has more.
Up until a week ago, Joseph Parker and Kevin Barry had spent 8 months apart. Not the ideal scenario, as Parker prepares for a high-stakes clash with countryman and amateur rival Junior Fa. Barry, though, is adamant that a promise his fighter made him means they've avoided any need to play catch-up.
He said, once you arrive, I'll be ready to hit the ground running. And for the very first day in the gym, we did like 12 rounds on the pads, which we've never ever done. So, he was true to his word. He's in shape.
In shape and in sync. The former WBO world champion says his first session with Barry after his trainer's 2 weeks quarantine gave them both confidence.
It took one round and then we're into our rhythm again. So it just shows the chemistry that we have. And also the knowing each other from all the, obviously all the camps that we've had together.
But one of Fa's coaches isn't so convinced. Eugene Behrman is the mastermind behind the success of UFC star Israel Adesanya and other Kiwi UFC fighters. And he says Parker and Barry's time apart is absolutely a factor.
You want to be with your head coach, the guy whose job it's been to impose the strategy and get across the strategy and the tactics as long as you can. So, yeah, it's definitely to our advantage that we've had all that time to stay with Junior. And, in my estimation, they're starting a little late. We've already started, so they're coming to the party a little late.
It's not the only advantage Beerman feels they have, with Far now an established member at Auckland City Kickboxing.
It's one of the phenomenons that I've witnessed in my gym is that everybody's uplifted, everybody's doing better because of that little osmosis. Junior is one guy that's taken massive inspiration from those UFC guys.
Beerman says Far has developed a close bond with Adesanya, last year's Halberg Sportsman of the Year. Far was even in attendance when Adesanya won the UFC interim middleweight title last April, digging deep to outlast American Kelvin Gastelum in a 5-round epic.
When that fight happened and then after the fight, it just kind of reinsured that all the training that we're doing in the gym definitely works and that we definitely have to fully apply ourselves because those guys are doing it at the highest level of their sport, so that means we need to do that as well.
Parker says he's well aware Far has a very smart team behind him.
The input that they're going to bring, they're going to analyse what I do right and do wrong. And they're going to, I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm sure this will be the best junior that we're going to see.
But Parker is also confident of a statement performance. And while they may not have had as much time together to prepare as Team Far, Kevin Barry says his man also has one clear advantage.
When the bright lights come on, we know how Joseph Parker reacts. We know how he performs. This is new ground for Junior, and he'll need all that experience from the team that he has to help him through that.
Just 6 weeks remain until those bright lights shine on what's being billed as the biggest all-Kiwi clash in boxing history. Moti hotaka o tia hipo nei, ko Clay Wilson aho.
Getting a lot of feedback on pokies and also supermarkets. So let's start with the pokies. This one says, hi Lisa, I would make sports tax deductible and subsidised by the government. If you can prove that you've been involved in sport or gym for an average of 3 times per week for the year, the government pays you and or your children's fees. Money should not be a barrier to sport or fitness, and the country makes huge gains from having its people participating in healthy disciplines. That one is from Paul. Simon's got in touch to say, I definitely disagree with funding sports from pokies. I agree it's unethical for the people who play pokies to have their money go to recreation. It should be spent on those who play. Let the sports fund themselves through subscriptions, sponsorship and fundraising. And Simon reckons we should get rid of the pokies. On the supermarkets, Jeff has got in touch. Says, I've just left Pack and Save in Thames. Just happened to notice that the 500-gram mainland organic cheese marked at $9.99 on the shelf scanned at $10.79. Not good. Customer service acknowledged and refunded. This is outrageous, says Jeff, and probably happening 1,000 times a day and still ripping people off. Thought you would like a fresh example from today, says Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. We'll get our super sleuth, Nick Trubridge, in on that. And you've sent us a receipt. You've got some waffle syrup and some acidophilus yogurt and some cream. There's some good stuff happening at your house tonight, Jeff. Thank you for getting in touch. Don't forget, you can check out all our stories online, particularly our videos if you've been listening. We'll be back tomorrow.
NZ News headlines at 6:30. Air New Zealand has begun drawing down a $900 million government loan as it reveals plans to make another 880 international crew redundant. 26 people involved in an Auckland-based drug ring have been charged with importing, producing and supplying illegal drugs. A 45-year-old man has appeared in the Christchurch District Court in connection with 5 separate home invasions in Upper Riccarton this morning. The Maori Party has replaced John Tamahiri with Rawiri Waititi as co-leader, pending special votes confirming his win in the Waiariki electorate. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, this week's overseas correspondent, Silva Tamba, is on the line from Estonia. Has it managed to avoid the COVID comeback affecting many other parts of Europe? There's a window in the world of fishing and fishing villages, and